Hey everyone, it's Ivan, KeepAgile.com, out here for another course review, and today talking about the 2-day Night Fighter course with Holistic Solutions Group. The course took place at the farm. Pretty cool range facility catering to civilian, law enforcement, military. A lot of instructors go through there. Actually, I think 2 years ago now, I ended up taking a night vision course there with Chuck Pressberg. But Holistic Solutions Group was coming, and I had the good fortune to go take their Night Fighter course, so showed up there. Kind of got spoiled that first day. Again, night fighting, it's going to go into the night, but when we first showed up, it was sunny out, it's pretty nice. People showed up early, had the opportunity to just kind of confirm zeros, things like that. And then course kind of kicked off. Initially going through essentially expectations for the students, what we were going to cover roughly, and then jumping straight into it. We initially started off just basically working offset, up pretty close, and figuring out what that offset was, both using our day optic and using our laser, and going back and forth between the two and kind of dialing it in. And then since everyone was kind of running different stuff, and it's a cool opportunity for learning, basically everyone was cleared out but faced back towards the vehicles with our guns and kind of a show and tell. Going through people's different illuminators and lasers and seeing what that looked like kind of at distance, looking back towards vehicles, barricade, little structure and stuff like that, which was definitely pretty cool. We then kind of went straight into some up drills, using all of those means at our disposal. So by way of example, working with just active, i.e. using your IR laser to break those shots, or going into passive, where you're basically going to end up using your day optic with or without IR illumination to get those good hits, and then also dipping into some white light. And so in different classes, usually you'll pick up little gems here and there. And this for me was kind of one of those gems in this class, in that going through and figuring out where under night vision, you had to have your day optic adjusted so that when you used your white light, you could still use your day optic with your white light under night vision. And if you pulled your night vision up, you could obviously still use that day optic with your white light, which obviously is way brighter than you'd probably want if you're just solely going to shoot passive, but it basically allowed for kind of like white light override. So you come in somewhere or you need to overpower, again, white light, and it was pretty interesting. I'd never kind of really done stuff like that, and that was definitely a pretty interesting takeaway, and it most certainly works. Next, kind of stacking complexity, started doing linear movement, just working towards our target and engaging on the move. And with that, kind of starting to throw in those different aiming methods, whether it's passive, active, or white light, and getting some reps in that too. Then some time was spent with basically weapon positioning, i.e. like where your muzzle is positioned, and then facing. So how to basically safely move with your weapon in and around people, crowded area, whatever it may be, and then getting into facing. So looking over, identifying your target, turning, and engaging. And getting into more and more complexity, starting to do lateral movement, ultimately in both directions, but basically moving kind of across the front of the targets and engaging, whether it was numbers or letters, basically going through, engaging your targets, and with different methods, whether it's shooting through passive, active, or even that white light. And of course, going back the other direction. Something that was touched on too is the idea of shooting with your weapon compressed, like stock over your shoulder. And especially when you're active aiming with a laser, most certainly doable. So people were able to get reps on that too, if they want to kind of try out that technique. From there, we ended up doing some barricade work. Basically coming up to the barricade, working around either left to the right, and engaging our targets as they presented themselves. And lastly, on that day one, getting to work basically through a threshold, which, whether people recognized it or not, was a culmination of all those little things that we had worked throughout that night in isolation. And so now, again, weapons posture, approaching a doorway, either shooting from ultimately around like a barricade, that movement, all of it. But basically moving into the threshold, engaging whichever targets were called out, and yeah, basically working on clearing a room essentially. And then probably earlier than we would otherwise, ended up calling that first night. You get to a certain point where there's diminishing returns if people are no longer able to take that information in. And it ended up getting pretty cold. For my own part, I had been there before at like a night fighter course, and yeah, I don't like being cold. So I had all my level 7 stuff. I was cozy, probably on the verge of sweating. But a lot of people ill-prepared, like wearing Vans and stuff, like in the snow. So ended up calling it that night, only to resume that next day. That second day started off in the classroom, initially kind of going over some concepts as well as tactics. And then after that short block, moved outside and started going over the look at me drill. Basically a drill kind of scaling in complexity, everyone's guns cleared out, chamber flags in, and basically working on the stimulus of like, hey, heard something, does it need my attention? Look, identify the threat. If so, turn so that you can engage with your gun. Yes, absolutely pointing guns at people. A couple things on that. One, there's a safe way and unsafe way to do that. It was done safely, and there's value in that. If the only time you've ever pointed a firearm at someone is at that time when you need to defend yourself or your loved one, you might not want that to be the first time. And so I think there's value in all kinds of training done safely, whether it is drills like this or sim rounds, airsoft, whatever it may be, but someone on the other side of that gun. So to that end, ended up working through this drill. And then scaling in complexity to whereas you and your partner, and also kind of working in essentially positioning. So I want to, if I'm dealing with this threat here and there's another threat over here, how do my partner and I basically position ourselves so that we are protecting each other? Someone's back's not exposed, like just turned 180 like next to me or something along those lines. So definitely a lot of value in that drill. Next, while it's still fairly light out, over to the shoot house and kind of working through concepts and principles of the shoot house, whether it was corner fed rooms or center fed rooms, and kind of working through those concepts of essentially CQB. Mind you, not a CQB course, but it was a CQB course. Every different course you go to kind of has some sort of bent, like, hey, here's where the emphasis is on. And this was most certainly a night fighter course involving night vision and things like that, with the emphasis kind of on like, hey, protect your castle. So you with your tools and equipment, defending your home. That's kind of what it was set up for. So initially working through, again, just those concepts, and then moving into working a little bit of white light before finally it was getting dark and it was time to layer on some complexity. Looking through those night vision tubes, much smaller field of view, kind of get this tunnel vision, but got to make it work. And so started working through basically those same concepts and principles, this time under night vision, and then it was time to swap over our bolts. So pretty cool training aid that was used for this course, haven't really seen it before, is the Blackbeard by Mantis. And so basically swapping bolts out to where it had essentially this like inert laser bolt carrier group and a magazine, so it'd do a trigger reset for your gun. And with that, now armed with guns firing lasers, basically able to work through that shoot house and solve problems, this time with some paper targets, and able to have people run through a couple different setups. Of course, everyone's a hero against paper targets, so what about when there's someone on the other side of it? So now with guns equipped with lasers, was able to basically do some kind of one-on-one. A couple different scenarios that we were able to work through. And again, in the context of, hey, you, responsible citizen, homeowner, need to address a problem in your house. And yeah, it's pretty cool being able to work through that. And a lot of kind of just learning points along the way, whether it was key kind of target indicators as far as like white light, or did you see IR light and sounds, all these different things. But being able to work through those scenarios, pretty cool. Then kind of wrapping up day 2 was a hot wash. So going around the room, kind of lessons learned, high point takeaways for people from the class, and it was good. I think everyone largely learned a lot. The class, like I said, like they'll tell you like, hey, this isn't a CQB course, and it's not, but it is. Here's the thing. CQB is such a dense subject. Like there's so much that goes into tactics and all these things. Then it's like, hey, 1-man, 2-man, 4-man, like platoon sized element, like what are we doing? And really at the end of the day, like shorter answer is don't go into a structure if you don't have to go into a structure. But this was largely centered around, hey, getting you to learn or better use your tools, i.e. night vision, weapon, things along those lines. And then, hey, here's some concepts and principles should you need to defend yourself in your home with said tools. And overall, honestly, I think it was an awesome course. For my own part, kind of the hidden gem in there for me was kind of working that white light with night vision, which hadn't really been exposed to. But across the board, it was great. Day 1, like I said, largely just dedicated to that live fire, and then day 2, kind of concepts, principles, and scenarios of kind of 1-man CQB. And getting to go against people too, it was really good. Like I think a lot of people learned a lot of stuff through that portion as well. If you're interested in taking a course with Holistic Solutions Group, there'll be links down below. You can check out all their different offerings. Overall, definitely pleased on this course though. And last but not least, if you appreciate my content and want to support it, greatly appreciate it. Whether it's liking and sharing videos or going over to kitbadger.com, picking up stickers, patches, things like that, or supporting me directly, either through Patreon or Utreon. And you can always find all of my stuff on a number of different platforms other than YouTube, to include Rumble and Utreon. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.